So we have already covered from chapter 1 to chapter 16. If we like to divide the sutra into two parts, the first part is from chapter 1 to 16, is from chapter 1 to chapter 16. There's a general concept. From the second part is from chapter 17 to 32. It's more specific. It goes into a lot more details from 17 to 32. Some people in the past emphasized that chapter 1 to 16 is for the people with higher wisdom, because when they read the general concept, they already know the details. And the second part from 17 to 32 is for those who still need more elucidation, more explanation. So let's read the first paragraph. At the time, Subhuti asked the Buddha, "World Honored One, if a virtuous man or woman is determined to develop the supreme enlightenment mind, how should his or her mind abide, and how should it be subdued?" So that question is more or less the same as the first question raised by Subhuti at the beginning of the sutra. If you turn to page 1, the last paragraph, "World Honored One, virtuous men and women develop the supreme enlightenment mind. How should their minds abide? How should they subdue their thoughts?" So that's more or less the same question as this question. So from chapter 17 on, it's more elucidation. It's more specific. So Subhuti asks, "World Honored One." World Honored One in the Sanskrit language is Bhagava. If a virtuous man and woman is determined to develop the supreme enlightenment mind, how should his or her mind abide, and how should it be subdued? So Buddhism is not about just worshipping, it's about mind. How do we determine to develop the supreme enlightenment mind, and how should this mind abide? And if there are thoughts, delusory thoughts coming up, how do we subdue them? The mind is the forerunner of all actions, the forerunner of speech, of your behavior. If you can control your mind, you control your destiny. If you cannot control your mind, you let your mind to go in every direction just for the satisfaction of the senses, just to fulfill the greediness, just to express the feeling of emotions of anxiety, fear, disappointment, anger, jealousy, hatred. You allow your mind to go everywhere. But the Buddha here, chapter 17 said, the Subhuti asked the question, if we are walking the path of the sages, how do we develop our mind? How should we develop our mind? Supreme enlightenment mind in the Sanskrit language is Anuttara Samya Sambuddhi. Anuttara Samya Sambuddhi. Anuttara is nothing on top of that. Nuttara is the top. Anuttara is the most supreme. There's nothing on top. So it's the supreme enlightenment. Samya is equality and with no discrimination. Bodhi is enlightenment. So how should we develop this mind, and how should we let it abide, and how should we subdue our desultory thoughts? Well, next paragraph. The Buddha said to Subhuti, a virtuous man or woman who is determined to develop the supreme enlightenment mind should keep this in mind. I lead all living beings to put a stop to reincarnation and escape suffering, but when they have been so led, not one of them in fact stops or escapes suffering. Or we should say, when the Bodhisattva helps sentient beings to stop reincarnation and escape suffering, when sentient beings have been so led, the Bodhisattva should have the thought that not one of them, in fact, has been led to stop reincarnation or to escape suffering. There seems to be contradiction if you don't understand. How come that if you have helped to liberate sentient beings, not a sentient being is liberated? This is very profound philosophy. Next paragraph, let's read one more paragraph. Why, if a Bodhisattva clings to the notion of an ego, a personality, a being, and a life, it is not a true Bodhisattva. Why, Subuddhi? There is not really a Dhamma which can develop the supreme enlightenment mind. What does the last sentence mean? There is not really a Dhamma which can develop the supreme enlightenment mind. So let's explain that. Let's start with something easy. We, temporal human being, sentient being, have the fallacious fourfold ego concept, which is the ego, personality, being, and life. The ordinary people, if they're not practicing, they always have this conception in mind. Ego. The first one is ego, personality, beings, and life. Ego. What is this ego? It's this ego that breeds all the mental afflictions. This I. Because I, then is you, they, them. What is this I make up of? Body and mind. What is this body and mind? We call it the five skandhas. So the I, the ego is the I. Who am I? We always ask the questions, who am I? Body is, of course, the body. We know the body, the organ, with the physical body. Other than the body, we also have the spiritual side of it, which is the perception, conception, volition, and consciousness. Then we analyze, what is this body? This body is only physical. This body is only lasts for one lifetime, for this lifetime. We have been reincarnating for many lives because we have because of our karma. We are serving retribution of what we have done in the past. So karma, because of your own karma, of our own karma, we're reborn in this body. Everybody is different because every karma is different. No one is the same. Don't be jealous of someone who is rich, who is pretty, who is beautiful, who is healthy, because she earned it. She created all this karma for herself. Nothing to do with a creator. She did it all herself. And don't blame people or don't disparage people who are poor, who are sick, who are ugly, because they have done it in the past that have brought them experience what they have now. They have cultivated those causes. There's a cause, there's an effect. So the Buddha said, not God who is responsible for what you have, you yourself. So this physical body is in retribution for what we have done in the past. And of course there are other existences which are much higher level than us, and there are existences which are much lower level than us. For example, existent beings who are in the hell realm, in the animal realm, in the ghost realm. They are not as good as the human realm. However, human realm, there are above also the Zura's realm and the guardian angels realm, if you want to use the word guardian angels, or Deva's realms. So this is physical body, and all the others, the spiritual side, it's talking about I, the body side, and the spiritual side. I, your perception. What are your perceptions? The spiritual side of it, your nose, your eye, your ear, your nose, your touch, your tongue, all these six senses that interact with the outside environments. because of these interactions, your perception, and then you conceptualize in your sixth consciousness, you discriminate, and subsequently, jealousy, hatred, anxiety, fear, disappointment, all these mental afflictions come up, which lead you to do further karmic deeds. So we are always in that loop. So this is so-called I, never ending. It's always been like that, from one body to another, committing one karmic deed to another karmic deed. Some are good ones and some are bad ones. Not just bad ones. We didn't just do the bad deeds, we also do good deeds. Good deeds, you cultivate good cause, leads to good effect. Bad is to bad effects. But all these mixtures brought us to what we are now. And if you are not careful, you just allow you to do whatever you want, you commit all kinds of bad deeds, your next life is bound to be in reincarnation again, and it may be even poorer than this life. Or if you do all good deeds, it may be better than this life. But it's not ultimate. It's not anuttara samya sambuddhi. You are still in reincarnation. You are still in samsara, life and death. So we always have this ego. This ego has been with us for eons of years. For millions of years we brought this ego. We changed the form from one form to another, from one life to another. But that ego, we brought it forward. That energy, we brought it forward and reincarnate into every life. So we always have that ego. That ego contains a lot of mental afflictions. The conceptually arising conflictions and the innate mental afflictions. Self-view, greediness, desire, fraudulence, negligence, deceitfulness, jealousy, hatred, violence, you name them, almost unending and inexhaustible list of mental afflictions that we brought forward. That's our ego. That ego prison is made up of all these mental afflictions of greediness, hatred, you name them. And we've been in that prison since billions of years ago, carrying forward and forward. So the Buddha said, you got to break this ego wall. You have to set yourself free, to liberate yourself. So get rid of the ego. How? The sutras tell us what to do. In our meditation, in samatha vipassana, in all those sutras, we have all the guidance for us to get out from the ego prison. How many people listen though? How many people would cast their eyesight on that beacon light in the darkness of the ocean? They just drift in the boat in the darkness of the ocean. They see the beacon light and they don't know about it. They just keep on drifting from one life to another. Or if we use another example, in a forest, we just walk in the forest without a map going out. The map is there, but nobody look at the map. You can't go out from that forest. So, the Buddha said, no ego. Because of that ego, we go into life and death all the time. Break through the ego wall. So that first is the ego. When there's that ego, you assume the permanence of that ego. Maybe until the time that you are at the verge of death, you never recognize death. You think that death is so remote. You think that the body is so permanent that we don't really realize it. So because of your own ego, you also think that other people have egos. So it's ego, personality. That means you also recognize others' egos, and others' egos interact with you, and this interaction has brought forth a lot of worries, problems of the family, problems of individuals, problems of country, internationally. All these things is because of ego and personality. And aside from ego and personality, all the others we call beings. Sentient beings, non-sentient beings. And then life is continuity. We always never recognize the concept of impermanence, transiencies. Maybe we know when we read the sutra, when we read the words, we understand nothing is permanent, everything is fleeting. We shouldn't attach. But when we close the sutra, it's not there anymore. We start to attach. We start to react as if this is mine. This is my interest. This is my ego. Only when you read the sutra and you reflect, then maybe the wisdom is a little obvious. But when you close the sutra, it's not the same anymore. So the Buddha told us that initially, get rid of the ego, personality, beings, and life. That's the first step only. When you are being successful in ridding yourself of all this, eliminating of all this, ultimately, at a very high level, you are an arahat. No self. In the Theravada, when they practice, become the arahat, they are already out from life and death. So they eliminate, if you are successful in eliminating all the fundamentally, conceptually arising mental afflictions, and also eliminate all the innate mental afflictions, you are the arahat, you are the saint, the arahat. You're out from samsara already. And then it says that yes, you become the arahat, but that's already out from life and death. But even that dharma, don't attach to it. So in other words, the dharma of being the arahat, go one step further. You don't even attach to that. A bodhisattva is help liberating all sentient beings. But when sentient beings are liberated, are being helped to liberate themselves, they don't have the notion of, I liberated sentient beings. Because what is a sentient being? It's causality only. It's just all the five aggregates put together. It's a sentient being of body and mind. It has no real existence. It has no real self. It exists, but it has no real self. It's just the existence of all causes put together. It itself per se is empty. It has no real self-nature because none of the five aggregates has a real self-nature. It is impermanent, dependent on causes, changing without an actual, real all by itself existence. So the Bodhisattva don't attach to the thought that a sentient being is liberated. It's go beyond that concept. So in effect, there is no sentient being being liberated, as there's nothing to be obtained or attained. If there is something to be obtained or acquired, it is not the truth. There is no truth and no falsehood. There is no attachment. If you attach to the idea that there is a sentient being that you have helped them to be liberated from samsara, you have attachment. Then does it mean that if you do not have to help to liberate sentient beings? No, it doesn't mean that. If you do not help to liberate sentient beings, you are not a bodhisattva. You still live in the self-centered life and not directed yourself to the divinity, non-discriminating life. If you think that you have directed your self-centered life to the divinity life and have liberated sentient beings, you still have the fallacious concept of ego, personality, beings, and life. So in other words, you've done all these, you don't attach to them. How come the sutra says there is not really a Dharma which develops the supreme enlightenment mind? How come there is not really a Dharma which develops the supreme enlightenment mind? Who develops the supreme enlightenment mind? Who developed that enlightenment? Is the person. Who is that person? That person is empty. It's just the existence of the five skandhas. What is being developed? The supreme enlightenment. What is that supreme enlightenment? It's causality. By itself is empty. But we need the enlightenment though. It does not mean that we don't need it. No, since it's empty, we don't need it. No, we still need it. Just like language, words. We need the words, the language, to express. But the words and the language themselves are not the expression. All of this is sunyata. They exist but no self-nature. So in other words, we continue to detach. We detach and detach and detach. So what's then, people ask, if you continue to detach, what comes up? You still have something to acquire? You still have to worry about what comes up? After you detach all these things, what have I got with? You always think, what have I got? You want to get something. You don't have to get anything. There's nothing to be obtained. Anything that can be obtained is causality. Anything that can be obtained is subject to impermanence. Are you looking for impermanence? When everything is detached, if you really want to know it, the sutra says, if you really want to know when everything is detached, what have you got? If you really want to know that, if everything is detached, prajna comes up. Prajna comes up. What is prajna? The wisdom. And even the wisdom, you detach, what comes up? If we have to say it, nothing comes up actually, because if there's a thing, it is not right. If there is a thing as falsehood. So don't worry about what comes up finally. People ask, if I don't have any thought, so what would I have? What would I left with? You still want something to live with you. That's not right. That's not the right way. So remember the Heart Sutra says, therefore in emptiness there is no form, nor perception, nor conception, nor volition, nor consciousness. No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind. No realm of the eyes up to no OH and death, nor the extinction. There is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no extinction, no path, no ignorance or its extinction, no wisdom and also no attainment, because there's no object to be obtained. When people listen to this sutra, they don't know. They say, oh, no wisdom? Maybe I have no wisdom, no attainment, I can't attain anything. But they don't know. They don't know the real meaning of it. So I cover, so this is, Dharma is not really a Dharma because it's empty. It's sunyata. If you always think that way, wonders will work out. Because then you're detached. There's no mental afflictions anymore because you train yourself continuously to detach. Initially, you detach all your anxiety, your fear, your greediness, your selfishness, your hatred. All these things disappeared. But you have to train yourself initially. You can't just open the sutra and say, oh yes, I have to be empty. And then you're not training yourself. So you have to always practice that vipassana. There's no object to be obtained. When you're meditating, you practice that, contemplate that vipassana approach. There's no object to be obtained. Not a single thought. Not a single thing to be obtained. Not a trace. That's Tathagata. That is also called Tathata, or absoluteness, or reality, or the truth, or the real mind. Many names for it. That's the Buddha nature, the Bodhi that we're looking for. But then there's nothing to look for. But I have to talk about looking for. Otherwise, nobody understands. So Vimalakirti, the Vimalakirti Sutra, Vimalakirti, sutra is a sutra which is very prominent, and it says there was a layman called Vimalakirti. Actually, he achieved ultimate nirvana already, but he still appeared, reborn in this world to appear as a layman. And then one day he was sick, and Bodhisattva Manjushri Bodhisattva led all the other Bodhisattvas to pay a visit to him. And in the visit they talk about sunyata, emptiness, they talk about tathata, they talk about absoluteness, and they talk about various ways to achieve this absoluteness, achieve this anuttara samya samputti, achieve this supreme enlightenment. They talk about 32 ways. Different bodhisattvas talk about different ways. For example, getting rid of the ego, practicing meditation, samatha, vipassana, doing good deeds, all these various ways. And finally, Manjushri Bodhisattva asked Vimalakirti, what is your view of the way? What is the view of the way? Vimalakirti didn't respond and kept silent. No words, no more words. And Manjushri Bodhisattva said, greatness, that's the way. No more words. Any word uttered is not that. How should we say? No words. Beyond words. Beyond language. We go beyond that. Don't attach to words. So no words from Vimalakirti. Okay, we stop at this point, and we still need a lot of training in us to achieve that way. People, if you don't learn the sutra, you don't know what we're talking about because it's so contradictory. In the sutra, it sounds very contradictory if you don't understand it. How come liberating all sentient beings and not a single sentient being is liberated? How come there's no ear, no eyes, no tongue, no taste, no touch, no sound, no smell? Everything is negative because they don't understand. If you just go by the superficial meaning, you lose it. And language is so limited. Even if you have the best novelist, the best writer, you can't express it. Like the fragrance of a flower, say a camellia, say a rose. If you let that rose, you sniff at it and you have that fragrance, and you let 10 different novelists, best writers, to describe that fragrance, they're not the same. They're not the same. And can you say one of them has fully communicated the actual fragrance? The actual fragrance is not in the words. The actual fragrance is not in the words. What the words explain is only a glimpse of it. How can words give you the fragrance? But you need the words to know the fragrance. Otherwise, how can you know? Don't take the words for the fragrance.